Hey everyone, I wanted to make a live video. I was reading an article the other day about nutrition myths that dietitians want to get rid of. This, I'll put a link in the description box so you can read it yourself. It's not the latest, greatest article, but it's still relevant and it's still something that they would print today if they could. I mean, not if they could, they would print something like this. Basically, what media do is they kind of regurgitate the same stuff over and over. They just put new faces and new names on the article and they make it look like it's relevant new content. But anyway, they quote a bunch of registered dietitians, RDs, which in the United States means you have formal training in nutrition and dietetics. Um, it means you know more than most people about nutrition, but they do have a clinical role to play, especially in places like hospitals and nursing homes. But anyway, so there were 11 myths that they identified. There's a bunch of them, and you can go back to my previous videos if you want more weight loss tips that are bad. And I made 4 videos about that, so there's more than enough there. Anyway, I'll get right to it. The first one is there are no bad foods. So what I say is the myth that they're debunking. I would say that there is a spectrum. Like most things in life are a spectrum. It's not good or it's not completely bad. It's not like, oh, this is really, really awful. You should never have it ever again. And then there's food that you should eat all the time. By that logic, you should eat nothing but kale. But you would not really enjoy a diet of kale. You would die, actually, because it just doesn't provide a lot of what you need, like calories. Has a lot of nutrients, vitamins, a lot of other good stuff like the micronutrients. It doesn't have a lot of macronutrients, but you really need both. So, man, there's something itching. You don't want to just rely on one food and eat nothing but kale smoothies all the time. But you wouldn't get the sustenance that you actually need. And I'll talk about juicing a little later. That's one of the myths, actually. But I'm saying there's stuff that you should prefer less, and there's food that you should prefer more. Stuff like kale, blueberries, that's great every day. Stuff like grass-fed beef, if you like it. Not a big fan of that, but you can eat that too. Having a protein shake every day or a protein bar, you should probably eat one of those. Whole grains, low-fat milk, or I guess you can eat the full fat if you don't care about the full fat. But eating stuff like sweet potatoes and other natural food that fills you up and gives you macro and micronutrients, that's stuff you should be eating every day. Stuff like ice cream and toaster strudels and cinnamon toast crunch. I love cinnamon toast crunch, but I can't depend on cinnamon toast crunch for everything I need. Although I've had an entire box in one day. I didn't notice any really bad effects until I stood on the scale, but that can't be really good for your blood sugar. But I'm not saying you should eat cinnamon toast crunch like that. But my point is the cinnamon toast crunch should constitute a smaller part of your diet than other stuff like sweet potatoes and whole grain wheat. That's all I'm saying. The next myth is use unrefined sugar. So there's unrefined sugar and then there's refined sugar, right? So the sugar that you find in fruit is that's unrefined sugar, right? It's just there naturally. Although the fruit that we eat today is not the same fruit that they were eating 200-300 years ago. They've created new varieties, and they've created varieties that concentrate sugar more than it was in the past. So an apple today is not like an apple was 200 or 300 years ago, or even 100 years ago. The farmers who make the apples know that we like sweet fruit, so they created varieties that have more sugar in them. But even so, an apple doesn't have a lot of sugar, like 12 or 15 grams for a big one. I just had a peach. I don't know how many grams of sugar that has. I really don't want to know. Probably not a lot. My point is it's unrefined sugar. But anytime you grow sugar cane and then you extract the sugar and then you concentrate it, that's called refined sugar. And there's 50 different names. You can go online, type in all the different names for sugar, and you'll find it. And it's incredible. It's like molasses and beet sugar and cane sugar and this type of sugar and blah, 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 blah. That's the refined sugar. But my point is, from a metabolic standpoint, it's really all the same. So if you're really watching your blood sugar, which I do once in a while, I think the best way to figure out if you're getting too much sugar is just to measure it. So it's kind of primitive, but you take a blood sugar device or a glucometer and you prick it, you go like that, and then you take you take the glucometer and then you put a test strip on it, you measure the blood, and it tells you what your blood sugar is. I think it's milligrams per deciliter. I think that's what or it's nanograms. I forget what the exact unit is, but it should be 70 and 100. That's a good range. Last time I checked, I was at 84, so I'm not really worried about eating too much sugar. And the next myth is related to this. It's fruit has too much sugar. I think there's kind of this fruit phobia. And in fact, I think that's one of the hallmarks of a disordered eater is when you start fearing natural foods. I knew somebody back east who didn't eat carrots because carrots have sugar. Isn't that kind of retarded to avoid carrots? I mean, we're talking carrots here. It's like 3 or 4 grams of sugar per 100 grams of weight. It's not that much, but he didn't want to eat baby carrots because it had sugar. I think that's like borderline disordered. Maybe cut back on the stuff like the dates or the figs. Those are really concentrated, although I still eat those because they're really good. But if you are really conscious of your sugar intake, you should not be avoiding stuff like melons, peaches, plums, berries, carrots. You should not be avoiding that stuff because it just doesn't have a lot. And it's not the same. The other thing, too, is that fruit comes with a lot of good stuff. So even guys like Robert Lustig, who's the pediatric endocrinologist at UCSF, he's kind of he's anti-sugar, like anti-fructose, and he thinks that's causing a lot of non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and diabetes and obesity, and he thinks fructose should be regulated. I'll do another video on his book, but even he thinks natural fruit is good for you because it has fiber, vitamins, minerals, it's very filling. I know that 2 or 3 bananas is like a meal in itself because it's really heavy, right? And it tastes really good. And I like it. And I like it when it's soft and has the brown spots on it. It's so good. The article also talks about bananas having potassium. Well, here's a little hack for you. If you really want potassium, eat sweet potatoes and tomatoes. They actually have more potassium than bananas. I don't know why we equate bananas with potassium. I don't get it because it's not even number 1 in that category. There's other stuff that has more potassium. Anyway, that's a side tangent. If you like bananas, eat bananas because you like them. They give you energy, but don't avoid them because they have sugar unless you're really diabetic and you're really sensitive to blood sugar changes. There was this video not too long ago. It was some guy and he took a Hershey's bar and a banana and he ate one and measured his blood sugar. Then he ate the Hershey's bar, measured his blood sugar, and the banana actually caused a higher rise in his blood glucose, which is kind of surprising. That doesn't mean you should avoid bananas because what you're really looking for is long-term blood sugar levels. That's why you should have your HbA1c measured once in a while. You can just go to your physician and order a lipid panel and they'll measure that. It should be below 5.5. I think 5.5 is kind of like the cutoff that you should be aiming for. But still, a temporary rise in blood sugar doesn't mean that your fasting blood sugar is really going to be high. It's just like a temporary spike and then it comes down. I've probably had several thousand bananas in my life, like no kidding, really. And I still don't have any blood sugar problems. Now that's just me, but my body's kind of the same as yours. Next one is juicing. This is one of my favorite ones. I actually had some juice last week. If this weren't a live video, I'd show it to you. But there was this juice bar in this really nice part of Washington, D.C. Actually, it was across the river, but it's pretty close. Arlington, if you want to be exact. And they had all of these juices, and they had these really funky names. And I got 16 ounces, which is, how much is that in milliliters? I don't even know. Whatever. But it wasn't that big, and it was $8.50, and it had all these different vegetables and fruits. And don't get me wrong, it tasted really good. I really enjoyed drinking it, but I didn't really feel healthier. I just kind of looked healthier walking around with this green juice because that's what bougie people do. They drink green stuff because it gives off this message to the world that they're eating really healthy, but I don't think it really makes you that healthy. You're just concentrating all that sugar. So if you really want an insulin spike, drink juice. And I don't know where this whole juicing thing started. I think it started with Jack LaLanne. I don't know if you remember those infomercials from the 90s, and he was wearing like the jumpsuit, and he looked like a complete dork. Jack LaLanne, he left the world a better place, I think, but he was just kind of goofy sometimes. And Jim Carrey did this really good Saturday Night Live skit one time, and it was thinly disguised as Jack LaLanne, and the crowd was like, juice, 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 juice. I don't know if it's on YouTube, but if you can find it, it's really funny. Anyway, I think juicing is one of those things that just kind of makes us feel healthy. It doesn't really make us healthier. I will say, though, an easy way to get more fruits and vegetables into your diet is to puree it. So don't juice it, but just blend it. Because when you blend it, you keep all the fiber and you're not extracting all the good stuff. So I like to take bananas and berries and green vegetables, because green vegetables kind of taste kind of bad. But if you blend it in a really good blender like Ninja or Vitamix, if you want to go really high level, you can get all of the nutrients without tasting it, because you just mix it with soy milk or regular milk, whatever, and bananas, and it tastes really good. So don't juice. It's stupid, I think. If you're gonna juice, at least add some protein or a scoop of peanut butter. Like, get something else out of it. Next one is only shop the perimeter of the store. Yes, this one, I've heard this one so many times. Oh, if you want to eat right, shop the perimeter of the grocery store. When I started working at Whole Foods back in 2007, they opened a Whole Foods near my home, and I was really excited and I applied for the job. There was this trailer parked outside the building, and it was like, now hiring. I said, I want to work for the produce department, and I did. I got the job. I've worked there for 18 months. But I was really into produce at the time because that's a long story. I won't go there, but it was. I kind of subscribed to that myth at the time, and then I realized working at Whole Foods that that's not always true. A lot of the grocery stores, the freezers are in the middle, and there's a lot of good stuff in the freezers. Or there's the whole grain pasta, or there's the canned vegetables, there's the beans, there's the bulk section. I love the bulk section, by the way. Where they have all the granola and the sweets and the peanuts and yeah. Anyway, sometimes that stuff's in the middle, and saying that you should only shop the perimeter assumes that every grocery store is the same. Like, all of the processed stuff is in the middle, then all the good stuff is on the perimeter. So once I started working there, I realized that wasn't true. But I still see people saying that 12 years later. It's like, why are you still saying that? It's stupid. Next myth is don't eat egg yolks. Yeah, you should. In fact, you should probably be eating the egg yolks. In fact, if I were eating eggs, that's the only part I would eat, because it has all the good stuff. It has the leucine. It has the all the fat, like the saturated fat, the cholesterol, which isn't bad for you, by the way. It's actually good for your health. But there's a lot of vitamins in it. The only thing you have on the white is the protein. But if you want protein, get a scoop of protein. Like, get a protein powder. They even have egg protein powder if you really like eggs. But you're really missing out. Just cook the whole egg. I'm not really into eggs. I can only eat them if they're hard boiled. But I see those cartons of, like, it's just egg protein. Like, why? Why would you do that? Why don't you just buy the whole carton, cook the whole egg, and get all the nutrition out of it? You shouldn't fear saturated fat. That's so 1990. I don't know why people are still doing it. Next myth is drink 8 glasses of water a day. Well, the thing is, everybody's different. My body isn't that big, so maybe I don't need that. Or maybe it's cool outside. Or maybe I'm not exercising a lot. I don't know who made this up. That'd be a good topic for a video. Who made up this stupid myth that you have to have 64 ounces of water each day? It depends on so much. If it's a hot day and you're working outside, you probably should have more. If it's a cool day, you should probably have less. If you're doing a lot of exercise, you should drink more. It's really that simple. I judge it by the color of the urine. I know that's kind of gross, but it should be pale yellow. If it's pale yellow, you're probably hydrated. If it's a dark yellow, you need more. So that's kind of like the natural way of figuring out how much water you need. It's pretty nifty. Number 8, you should only eat superfoods. I remember one of the first books I ever read about nutrition. This was when I was in college. It was called Superfoods. I don't have a copy here. I don't have the hard copy, but it had this really awesome cover. It was by a doctor named Dr. Platt. I think he was down at UC San Diego. No, he was at Scripps in San Diego, which is a really good hospital down there. And I remember it was like lean turkey, garlic, blueberries, spinach, or the other ones. Oh, walnuts, salmon. It was a lot of good food, right? But the thing is, you shouldn't just eat foods that are considered super, and there's really no scientific definition of what makes it super. Now, if you read the book, he explains why he thinks they're superfood, and there's a lot of good things about it. But if you don't like salmon, should you still eat salmon? Probably not. You should probably eat something like halibut or tilapia, something a little less offensive than salmon. Or if you don't like walnuts, I'm not big in the walnuts. You can eat other stuff like almonds and sunflower seeds and still get the nutrition out of it. But yeah, I don't really believe in this idea that some foods are really super. Some are better than others. That's true, but you shouldn't rely on just these superfoods. I remember acai was the next big thing because it was kind of exotic and nobody had ever heard of it. It's like, oh, it's from Brazil. It's a strange fruit from Amazon, from the Amazon, I should say. And they had these packets of acai that you could put in your smoothie. It was kind of stupid. And then it was bulletproof milk, or no, bulletproof coffee. Let's stick a thing of butter in our coffee and that'll make it great. Go ahead. But again, this kind of stuff goes in cycles. It just goes in waves. Number 9 is gluten-free is healthier. Every grocery store, even the low-end grocery stores, all of them have a gluten-free section now, if you haven't noticed. And I'm telling you what, gluten serves a really good purpose. If you've ever had gluten-free food, it just sucks. It's just not the same. I see now that they're making pizza gluten-free and they're making cookies gluten-free. You can eliminate gluten, but you're still consuming a ton of flour, a ton of sugar, a bunch of other processed ingredients. Unless you really have celiac disease, you shouldn't be avoiding gluten. That's another big myth or a big fad these days is gluten-free. Everything's freaking gluten-free now. Why? Gluten adds texture, it adds flavor. It's so easy to use, and nobody's really allergic to it except some people, very few. My former neighbor back in Virginia, she really was diagnosed with celiac. She couldn't even have beer or soy sauce because there were trace amounts of gluten in both of them. She was super sensitive to it. She really had to go gluten-free. Today, if you have celiacs, it's a good time to be alive because they make everything without gluten. But if you're not sensitive to gluten, you shouldn't cut it out. There's no reason to, because then you're going to eat products that are not as good as the original. So if you want pizza, just eat whole wheat pizza. If you want crackers, eat Triscuits and Wheat Thins and pita chips and all the other good stuff. Life without wheat would be really different. I feel bad for people who really do have celiacs, but I don't feel bad for the people who are depriving themselves of gluten and they don't have a gluten sensitivity. Their loss. Number 10, you have to cut carbs to lose weight. I can make this a whole different video. Carbs serve a lot of good purposes for hormones, for energy, for digestive health. They add a lot of variety. They usually come with a lot of vitamins and minerals. I know a lot of people who do paleo, they always have some kind of B vitamin deficiency. They're always lacking in something because they're not eating grains, they're not eating fruit. It's not a good idea to cut all those carbs. Carbs usually come with good things. Now, if you're eating Lucky Charms, even that, General Mills injects a bunch of vitamins and minerals in Lucky Charms. So I guess it's not completely bad, right? But let's just say you have a piece of cake, right? Ton of carbs. You should probably limit those kind of carbs, but limiting stuff like quinoa, rice, bread, potatoes. Well, that's carb. It's just, there's no reason to. What about vegetables? Those have carbs too, right? I think it's just another fad. We're kind of in that low carb phase. 20 years ago was the low fat phase. Who knows what's coming next? What you shouldn't do is follow fads. You should follow science and tried and true principles. And cutting carbs it's not necessary. Now, a lot of people have lost a lot of weight cutting carbs, but that's because they just made their diets less exciting. It's not because they cut the carbs. It's just because all the stuff they were overeating, like cake and pies and cookies, had carbs in it. So when they cut their carbs, they stopped eating the stuff that they were overeating. It wasn't the carbs themselves. And they've done so many studies that show that the composition of diet has no effect on weight gain or even fat deposition or carbohydrate deposition. It just doesn't. And then the last one, it's kind of like number 10, pasta makes you fat. I think pasta is seen as this pasta that has the fiber and the B vitamins and all that. There's no reason you can't have it. In fact, I think it tastes really good. I've had buckwheat pasta, gluten-free, by the way, because buckwheat, despite its name, is gluten-free. I've had whole grain pasta. It tastes great. I like it. It has this like nutty flavor. Combine that with some good marinara sauce that doesn't have a ton of sugar. It's actually a really good meal. I always say that no one food can derail your diet or your health. No one food is your problem. If you're overeating, if you're binge eating, you're probably overeating, binge eating on a bunch of different things. It's not just pasta. It's not just carbs. It's like a bunch of things. Because what happens is you get used to one food and then you look for another stimulus. That's what I always did. Sometimes I would have, well, I don't want to talk about binge eating and overeating right now, but no one food is your problem is my point. So those are some of the myths that that were mentioned in this article. You don't need to drink a ton of water. You don't need to cut out carbs. You don't need the juice. You don't need to focus on superfoods. Okay, there's a bunch of other myths. You can go back and watch my previous videos. I think it's called Weight Loss Tips That You Should Ignore. Those are good videos. Each one's like 15 or 20 minutes and educational and entertaining at the same time. I hope you found this useful. If you are struggling with overeating, binge eating, other bad eating habits, visit my website, eatwithcontrol.com. I will put a link in the description below. You can always contact me, schedule a call with me, free strategy call, and I will also put a link in the description box below. And I plan to make future live videos like this. I'm always reviewing books and articles, and I'm trying to separate truth from fiction. So I hope you found this useful, and I will see you next time. Bye, guys.